architecture or any of the system engineering stuff that we do, but primarily system architecture, it has to be usable, right? So if we can translate it into a format that people recognize, and this may not mean much to many people in the room, but these icons all represent, you know, bridges or parking loops or tunnel sections. So they mean things to people in the rail industry. But it's built in EA, and what it means is that these are instances of the structural element of the model. So the blue boxes on here, they're stations. And if I just jump back a second, structurally we have a station block, and then those are the instances of that station block. And we can assign requirements and things, like I said, from the doors environment to those blocks. So some of the requirements might be applicable to all stations. So, you know, paint every station blue might be our requirement. But we might also have requirements that are specific to a particular station. So, you know, Oxford Station, we want the platforms to be 100 meters long, let's say. But maybe the other stations, it's a different thing. So some of those requirements will be specific to the instance. Some of those requirements will be applicable to the class, I guess, or the block. That's kind of where we are at the moment. So we're still very early in the life cycle. And looking ahead, we've got lots of big challenges for the way that we will manage the program, but also the way that we will need to implement system engineering in the program. The East-West Rail is a program of projects. And what I mean by that is, I mean, hopefully it's commonly understood, but the thing needs to work as a program, right? The program delivers the output, it delivers the trains into services, it gets you that social economic growth and all of those sort of benefits that come from it. But to get to that point, we have to break this thing up into small projects. You know, maybe it'll be a station, maybe it's a geographic area and it's all the civil works in that area, perhaps. We don't, at the moment, know how we're going to split this thing up. At the moment, all of our design effort largely is being done by a single joint venture organization. So they will take our design up to what we call single option. So we look at different options, and then eventually we sort of discount options that we don't think are going to work. And then we get to the point where we have a single viable option. But once we have that single option, this program splits into, like I said, many projects, many work packages. Those work packages could be, as I said, could be civil infrastructure. So it could be a bridge or it could be a geographic area where it's all the bridges and all the cuttings and all the embankments or whatever in that space. It could be buildings, it could be a depot, it could be a station. But there's also things like we have to buy a fleet of rolling stock, a fleet of trains. Right? That's a project in its own right. We have to put signaling systems and telecom systems. So there's a system element to it. And then there's also an element of business and capability change, right? We cannot just build some infrastructure without the operator being capable of maintaining it, having the resources and the staff. So they have to recruit staff, train staff, train drivers need to be recruited, they need to be trained. So there's a business and a capability uplift project as well that goes with it. So it's not just dig a big hole and fill it with concrete. So the life cycle looks a bit like what we have at the bottom there, right? Which is largely we're somewhere there. We're just coming out the back end of what we call a feasibility stage. We kind of know what we can do and what we can't do, but we're still carrying options in different places of the design. So we need to go through this, what's called this single option development stage. And then it splits up, and it splits into all these different projects. And those projects might be delivered by a whole variety of different contractors and suppliers and all sorts of stuff. And that becomes really complicated to manage. So let me just give you, and apologies, my Visio drawing is terrible, but I think it illustrates the point. This is what we have right now, right? We're building up this environment in our door system of requirements, assumptions, interfaces, hazards, standards, etc., etc. Right? It's a longer list than this, but just to illustrate a point, there's these pots of data that exist. At some point, and not too far into the future, we're going to have to go through this data and start allocating it to a package. So like I said, it could be a station. It could be that this is a station, And then we'll take all the applicable station requirements and the assumptions and the hazards and things, and we'll put them in a package. And then there'll be another package, and so on, and so on, and so on. So the challenge we have here is that, one, we need to be able to go and put these things into packages that we can then tender and contract and hand across for a contractor to do. And secondly, we need to make sure that we haven't missed anything, right? There isn't a bit of requirements or a bit of scope somewhere that isn't sitting in a package, that everything is remitted. Otherwise, we'll get into a position whereby package A delivers and package B delivers and package C delivers, and yet we still can't run away because we've forgotten something. So there's a piece missing. The other thing that is worth noting is that, as I mentioned, some of this will be reused. So we need to think about that. So I mentioned that some of the requirements, for instance, they might be applicable to every station. So one of those requirements might be paint the station red. Well, that would be in package A and package B. But one of the requirements might be specific to Oxford in terms of the platform length, and that will just be in one package. It won't necessarily be in another package. So we've got to think about the way that we package this thing up into chunks that we can contractualize. But once we package it, then we have to get into the world of dealing with change and how do we instruct changes down through to packages. Bearing in mind, these packages themselves could be at different stages of design, right? You might have a package that you've released that is well into detailed design, right? Maybe even into construction, they're building something. Whereas another package, we might have released it in terms of it's gone out to tender, but we're still very much in the early design stages of it. So we've got an option, but we haven't really detailed designed it. And so what I'm trying to illustrate here is that in our requirement space, as an example, we might have a baseline. That baseline might have informed the packaging, package A, package B, and what we've put in those packages. But inevitably, we'll go through change. It happens on a major program all the time. And so we'll go through that change. We'll look at the impact of the change, and we'll go, yeah, that's fine, and let's re-baseline it now with this new position. And maybe we'll instruct that change at baseline to all the packages. We don't want to paint them red anymore. We want to paint them blue. Okay, well, all the stations are now painted blue. That's fine. And then we'll go through some more change, and then we'll get to another baseline point. But we don't want to instruct that new baseline on all the packages because maybe it'll be too disruptive on package A. Maybe you've painted package A red and you want to go to green now, perhaps. I don't know. But that's the challenge we have, which is we need to be able to manage these packages, some of which might be way further through their life cycle than other packages, which might be still much earlier on. I mentioned that we had Matt and the team come in. They gave us a really, really useful day of training, looking at some of these, which for us are more advanced features. Maybe this is bread and butter for some people, but they're advanced for us. And we're beginning to kind of trial some of these things. So we've built sandpit environments where we're sort of turning some of these things on and playing around with them and trying to understand whether some of these features will solve some of those problems that we have in terms of packaging and configuration control and managing baselines. So I think we might look at using global configuration and the streams feature to manage change to the baseline. Now that seems kind of self-evident. We're looking at whether we can use the component feature to put artifacts, different types of artifacts, requirements and interfaces and all these different things into components and use the reuse kind of feature so that we can, like I said, use requirement is painted blue, let's put it in 4 different station packages that exists. We're going to have to get much, much stronger on our user permissions, particularly if we want all of our supply chain to start working in our doors environment. So at the moment, we've got primarily one joint venture doing all our design, with a few sort of third parties coming in and contributing a little bit. But we could be in a position where we've got 10, 12, 15, 20 tier 1 contractors doing all sorts of work all over the place. So we want them to work in our environment. That's the aspiration. So we need to start thinking about how we can set up user permissions and partition areas and things that they can work and contribute in. And then we're going to have to get really, really smart on the reporting side of things as well, because we've got all these contractors doing all this work, all at different life cycle stages and different levels of maturity of design and things. you know, we recognise that we need to really get into the reporting space so that we can understand progress and where the issues are and all those sort of things. So we don't have answers for this. We're trialing these things, and I think that's the challenge that we have when we move from this single program to this many projects base. And that was it. I'm happy to take any kind of questions.
Ahead of time.
Yeah, there
Well
we go.
done, Stephen.
Well, if we can do the project ahead of time as well, then
Well, thank you very much for that, Stephen. I mean, having supported East West Rail for the last, what, 3-4 years, it's really great to get the bigger picture of what the whole rail line's all about. So are any questions from the, yeah, Graham, you want to?
you're going to grow my system L, Graham.
No, I'm not. It's not so much a question, but a bit of a comment. But I think you're doing exactly the right thing. The way you've broken it up and how you're approaching it is really good. It's great to see. So I'm currently working on SES. I wish we could have done something like that on SES. But one of the challenges that we even see challenges just trying to get our subcontractors to do simple stuff, let alone using doors next to manage requirements. They don't really even understand requirements. Everything comes in, as you're aware, Biggs works
Yep.
information documents, and they just look at them and think, oh yeah, and wave their hands at them. How are you going to address that challenge? I think that's going to be one of your major tasks.
It is, yeah, and we know that. I said the aspiration, and it is an aspiration at the moment, is that our supply chain, when we get to that point where we are releasing contracts to sort of big tier 1 contractors and things, we want them in our environment. That's where we want to be. But we do recognise that there's an enormous knowledge and awareness piece that comes with that, as well as the technical challenges of access and permissions and restrictions and things like that. I think we have a few things going for us a little bit. One is almost half the value of our program is going to be delivered by Network Rail. And Network Rail are pretty well versed in doing this level of sort of system engineering, maybe not aerospace defense kind of levels of system engineering, but they're pretty well versed in it. So half of our project value is going to probably be delivered by Network Rail. The other half, yeah, absolutely, we're going to have to really work with them to get them working in our environment. The aspirations, I don't want that kind of transactional kind of, here's a works instruction with a list of stuff you have to produce, and then in 12-18 months time, here's a whole package of documents back that shows. Yeah, it is what we're aiming for, but there's a lot to be done before we're in a place to be able to do that.
What I remember when we used to do automotive, they basically always had the handoff for requirements from supplier to vendor or vendor to supplier. We were trying to get them to work in the same environment, and that's really quite difficult.
Yeah.
Trying to keep the approach of basically work. Don't need to definitely work in the change. Configuration management side. Yeah. Getting the head around that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we need to. There's a lot we need to work out, and I'm not saying we have the answers. I think I'd like to get to the point where they're working in our environment, but they're almost oblivious to what is happening behind the curtain. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, we're talking about using global configuration management and streams, but I want to get to the point ideally where they have that package. You know, they got their package. It's in the door system. They're working there to do the VMV and the evidencing and everything else. But behind the scenes, we are pushing changes to them, and they'll know about the ones they need to know about, but they won't know about the ones they don't need to know about. And that, you know, we can keep some things behind the curtain, I think, perhaps, so that, you know, they just see what they need to see. But it's an aspiration.
Hi there. I mean, you talked a lot about the requirements management side of it. Is there an aspiration to also go into test management so that when your suppliers are doing their tests, it automatically completes the compliance and you can see test records and evidence and the like? Or are you planning on just staying there and almost doing the handoff just like the next stage down?
Yeah. I don't think in rail yet we've got to the place where we're doing a lot of test evidencing directly in our door system or in any particular system, right? We do a lot of V&V, and that verification and validation might reference up a test report that's been produced or some kind of output that's been done. But the planning for testing and commissioning, typically, I don't think we've got a lot of experience of doing that. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't. I'm just saying if you rounded up about 6 different rail projects, I don't think you'd find an example of where that's kind of been done before. But it is something we probably should be thinking about. I think I'm not dismissing it. The trouble I have is sometimes we can't see much further than the immediate next thing that's, the next crocodile by the canoe or whatever, right? So that's why my concern is and getting ready for that point when we have all these projects and things being released. The back end bit where they're all stitched back up together again into some kind of handover, yeah, that's a concern, but that's a crocodile a bit further away from the canoe at the moment. That's not really a great answer, is it? But that's the reality at the moment. We haven't given it an awful lot of thought in terms of test plans and things like that.
Hi. Yeah, just to validate what you were saying, been on a similar journey on my eventual arriving as being a systems engineer. Another thing to think about is you can actually generate your safety case in the way that you're doing it currently. Which in terms of time saving is massive on projects of this size.
So one of the, let me jump back a second. Oh, I was a bit faded out. Why is that happening? Anyway, yeah, we are. So we have our safety hazards captured in our door system. And are you a railways guy? Okay, all right. I mean, so we have to come under what's known as CSM, which is the Common Safety Method. So it's a process that applies all across the whole of the EU as to how we demonstrate that a railway is safe to operate. Very heavy regulated process. So we have to go through what's called a hazard identification, and we identify our hazards, and then we mitigate them, and a lot of that mitigation will be through codes of practice and standards and stuff. So we say there's a standard over here, and that covers the hazard. And so part of the reason why it is important for me that we have the hazard stuff captured indoors is that we can begin to either refer to those standards and say, well, that's the standard that covers the hazard, or if it has a specific safety mitigation, we'll turn that into a requirement, and we'll put that in part of our requirement set that says, put handrails on all the stairs, and then through the V&V process, you'll be able to evidence that requirement is met, and then therefore it demonstrates that safety mitigation's been applied. So it is thought about. The other thing we're doing, and I didn't put it on this list because I thought it was a bit too railway specific, is there are what's called interoperability regulations that apply in the railway. So even after Brexit, we still have to prove that our railway could take trains from around Europe. And so we have to evidence those standards, those what's called NTSN standards, to demonstrate that we are compliant to the interoperability regulations. And that's another thing that we're managing through our doors environment. So again, just another set of requirements in effect that we have to kind of verify and validate. So yes, a lot of the underpinning work for the safety case is being handled through this.
A point from me, not really directed at you though, but kind of generically tying into your point about trying to bring more people into the environment. A challenge we were talking about at lunchtime actually is, how do you get these people into the environment, and how do you get them sort of working in that single source of the truth?
Yeah. Because
looking at what we've got here, all of these AI features, all this stuff that's coming out that IBM are developing is great. And sitting in a room full of systems engineers, we all sort of get it, and we all can sort of get on board with it. But I think there needs to be a bit of work on the simplicity of the user interface to draw these other people in, to make their journey a lot simpler. They don't necessarily care like the diagram we've got on the screen, they don't care about its position within a hierarchy or within the greater model. I think my recommendation to IBM, and I'm hoping other people will agree, is that if there's a way that we can make the front end of the user interface simpler for a lot of these other people who otherwise will look at doors and go, God, it looks too complicated. Just give me my Excel sheet and load it into me sort of once a week. I think that's a major challenge that certainly I've been having, and I think would help in your scenario as well.
I agree. I mean, as I said, we open up our access to our doors environment to third parties, network rail, primarily DFT to some extent as our client. Now that they are not going in every day and looking at stuff, right? And some of that is, I think, what I would call just tool fatigue. Do you know what I mean? Like we give them access to all these different tools and we expect them to work in it. And yet, you know, there's only so many hours in a day and these guys are busy guys and they just get a bit fatigued about learning another tool, another way of doing it. Now, yeah, inevitably, if it was more user intuitive, maybe that would be a good thing. I think the thing for me though is we can give access, it gives them visibility, it helps build confidence, I think, and that's a big part of what we're trying to do, which is to build confidence. You know, EWR has not built a project before. Right? We've never built anything. Network Rail's built loads of stuff. We've never built anything. So some of this is confidence building, right? We are competent and able to manage this data and manage their requirements and things. And by giving visibility in, I think it helps to build that confidence. But I completely agree, which is, the usability of the tool needs to support those stakeholders. And that's why we've given them areas, right? So they don't have to know all of this, or all of these projects that we've created and all the way it's configured and all the links and everything else. They just know that they've got a space and that's where their requirements are, and they can see that bit, right? So we're trying to make it as accessible as we can, but we know they're not going in every day and using it actively. They might dip in and out. But yeah, absolutely. And maybe we'll get to that point. So it's a journey, right?
It's not a question so much, more sort of the point that you were making. So the bit that I've always felt was missing engineering tools, we never focus enough on the enterprise architecture and the workflows. A lot of problems about it's not clear what someone is supposed to be doing. We solve that by defining activities. The engines within these tools to get them, send them an email, say do that. That's the only thing that they see, but that takes a lot of time and effort and therefore cost to set up. And the big projects we work on, projects don't seem to want to spend the time or money up front, build that in, but it will save so much time and money later if you actually can convince people that it's necessary to do at the front end.
I think just to add on, I know we're running out of time, but the other thing I would just add to that is it's a different way of working as well. I mean, up until now, most railway projects, it's very document based, as in you would write your requirements in a document, right? And then that document would go off and get reviewed and signed off and everything else. What we're trying to do here is manage artifacts at an artifact level. So that's, we have workflows. We can progress some requirements that we're confident in right now and go, okay, yeah, those are fine. We'll make them accepted. But these ones, no, there's still more work to be done to understand them. So it's a different way of working, and particularly because, like I said, because we're going to hand this asset back to Network Rail, they've got a big role to play in the assurance of it to make sure they're happy with what we give them back. They're not used to working in that environment, so there's a big way of trying to get them to kind of think about it in a slightly more model-y based approach, rather than well, here's your requirements there, and it's all in there, and you just have to review this thing and sign it off, right? And that's where they default to.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. That's fantastic. Thank you. Up next, we've got Ian Clark and Mark Bennison from MBDA. So welcome, guys.
Man on first.
Yeah, lead man on first, yeah. After this session, we'll have a short coffee break. We're hoping to get everybody out on the outside veranda for a photograph as well. That's good. So, and then we'll finish off with the discussion table, whatever we call it.
Okay, I'll start. So, yeah, good afternoon. My name's Ian Clark from NBJ and Mark Benson. Okay. Is it coming through? Okay. Yeah, so my name's Ian Clark from NBJ. I'm a system architect, NBJ. So Mark and I wanted to take this opportunity to share some of our experiences of ELM in NBJ, not just using it, but also Mark's going to introduce our introduction of ELM into our business. So we'll do a quick introduction session about myself and Mark and NBJ. I'm not sure how many people are aware of NBJ and what we do. Mark will take us through a business journey of how we got to where we are today and how long that's taken. I'll finish up with some experiences of using ELM at the coalface every single day. And I've been using it for quite a few years as part of the introduction and on live development programs. And if you've got time at the end, we'll feel and answer some questions. So let Mark warm up.
Oh, I'm the warm-up back.
Yeah, go on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, Mark Bennison. I'm the head of digital technologies in ALM. I used to be the head of ALM, but now I've got digital technologies as well. ALM is part of our application lifecycle management, so it's one aspect, and we'll cover it when we go into the slides on that. Just a bit of background. I started out very many years ago. I am old, so paper tape was still a big thing when I started working as a software engineer. And I started off on that big aircraft over there, which got cancelled 2 months after I just got out of university. So that was a real introduction to working in industry. But from then on, I've started off going through things like low-level software development. I sort of fell into system engineering, I suppose, in a way. But I've been around lots of the business functions, from lowly engineer up to highly paid consultant, if I was only highly paid. And around about 2018, I would say, I sort of moved into this digital space. That's where we started from. So there's a thing we refer to, it's called Matrix. We'll see a picture of it in a minute. It's our information backbone. Where I am at the moment, in terms of the business, and hopefully I can convey some of this to you guys today, is around, I'm interested in things like digital continuity. How do we get people working together? And that's not just internally, that's also with externals as well. And what's the future going to look like for us? How are we going to be doing engineering 2030, 2035, that sort of thing. So it's over to you, Ian. I think you're going to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
I'll press the button.
Okay. So I've been in this space really ever since I graduated from university. So I started off as a software engineer. I was very fortunate the company I first worked for back in the early 90s decided to do some model-based software engineering. This is before really systems engineering was a thing. What I would say for that first project back in 92, the systems team would document. It was interesting. The systems team were document-based. They produced a document SRS and gave it to the hardware team, and they gave it to the software team. And the software team used model-based approach. Pre-Windows, it was Unix-based. We were the software engineers, so the model was the truth. Even back then, the model was the truth. We did print documents and we coded from documents, but the model was the truth. A couple of years later, I went to another company doing ship and submarine towed arrays. It wasn't coincidence, but they used the same tool set, same software language. The model was the truth. I was there for quite a few years on various projects, but the model was the truth. Then joined a tools company, Artisan Software Tools, to get that systems engineering into the case tool world. Real-Time Studio became Integrity Modeler with PTC, so it still exists. And then I went back into the industry doing military comms and information systems. Everything model-based, but now as a systems engineer, using rational products, for example, and using Artisan products and EA. And then 12 years ago now, went to MBGA, similar tool set, similar approach, different domain. So I've done aircraft, I've done submarines, done comms, I'm now in missile systems. But ultimately, the approach has been somewhat the same for me. I've been quite fortunate. So really now, the stage I'm at now is I would say I'm very model based. I've always been model based systems, model based software. 6 years at Artisan, where I sort of cut my teeth on SysML, OMG, working with a few people in this room. Currently at MBJ, I'm working on one of their very large multinational model-based development programs as a system architect, and I've recently am system engineering technical expert as well at MBJ. And early in my career, I've been a member of INCOSE, been very active with the model-based systems engineering community in INCOSE UK and the architecting community. Spent 5 years as the co-chair of the INCOSE UK MBSE working group. So it's an opportunity I've been doing for quite a while to share. So I'm now at MBJ. Outside work, I always like to balance this now. Outside work with Matt, I like my skiing and I like my beer at the same time. A bit of squash, and I can find time a bit of golf. So it's not all work, quite a lot of play actually, but I like work and I like to play. Okay, sorry, it's a bit long.
That's all right.
That's all right, just get to know me. I'll do this, okay? Yeah, just a single slide, just for those that don't know about MBGA. It's not something we promote, I suppose, not supposed to promote it, but MBJ is really a European organization. So you can see top left, over a number of years since 1996, European defense organizations have been amalgamating with Martra, BA Dynamics, 98 got Linear, up until 2001, MBJ came into existence. And then 2006, we've got Germany, in 2010, it's Spain. So it's a European defense company, partly owned by Airbus, BA Systems, and Leonardo. And we ourselves now own some companies below that. So it's MBJ is really an international company, which is why, for example, quite a number of our projects are international projects, leveraging economies of scale, using the same tool set, different languages, different cultures, different ways of working, but the tool set is consistent. How we use it varies, but it's the same, we're using the same tool set. A couple of graphics on some of the stuff that we do with, and it's not just missiles, there's other stuff we do. And I've got a slide later which explains, sort of highlights the complexity of the systems we're dealing with. It's not just one thing that goes bang. There's lots of things around that as a system. And our vision from a European perspective is to be the leader and global player in the market space, sort of competing with America, etc. So a quick run through. So without further ado, I'll let Mark introduce the journey that we've been on, and we're still on it. I will say we're still on this journey.
The good thing about Stephen and his East-West Rail is they were talking about transportation systems. We are actually a transportation system company as well. We just go very quickly and we don't tend to come back. That's the thing about it. Yeah. So there's a lot of synergy, and also there's going to be it's all right. There's going to be more heresy, I'm afraid. So be prepared. So what I want to just put up is that this is around 2018. This is where we were. So it's a schematic of this. There are deliberate things on there. You might go, my God, it's not called that, Mark, but I left that there for a reason. This took us about 10 years to get here. So we started really around 2008 looking at how we could build an information architecture. And we have three fundamental building blocks, if you like, which are these three. So one's around the application lifecycle management, which is a bit I'm responsible for in MBDA. Product lifecycle management, which is around the physical stuff in the world. So that's another, ironically, he's called Mark Benson. So it's very confusing in MBDA is that my name or not? Anyway. And the third strand was around, well, what do we do with information that's not necessarily product related, but it's useful information to have in the business. So shareable and trusted information that we can use, best practices, lessons learned. And those are the fundamental pillars, okay? As you can see, most of this stuff here is built around Windchill, PTC, a bit of ThingWorks. But what I would draw your attention to on this is that we talked in the previous talk about the user interface, recognizing that when you go into any of these sort of low-level things, you get a horrible picture. So we built this thing we call a portal. And the idea of that was to abstract that sort of complexity of the tool away from the engineers so they could just concentrate on what's interesting to them. So, I'll put my hand up here. Yeah, you can go to the portal, you click one button to go and do something, and bang, up comes the complex interface again. So it was a great idea. We still need to work on improving that. Secondly, this thing we've called MSpace, or matrix space, if you like, was our attempt at how we can share information across domains. So, really these two things, and that's why they're in a little red thing, are very well connected because they're the same tool. Outside of it, this isn't connected at all. Okay, and in 2018, all it was RTC, and that's why I've left it as RTC there. So really, from an IBM perspective, if you like, we had a bit of Rhapsody, we had a bit of DAWs, we had RTC because it was an obsolescence issue. We brought RTC in for that reason. We probably had about 300, 400 users, systems, a few, but mostly software people built into that. So that's giving you the picture of 2018, if you like. So moving on from there, everyone has to have a V model in a system engineering presentation, don't they? Here's ours. What we found was every time we did something, there's a disconnect, okay? Whether it's a physical disconnect because they're in a different company, a different nation, as Ian alluded to, we're international, or whether it's, we pass things around because we can. We've examples from the past where we have a DAWs requirements, someone prints it out into PDF, they send it to another department, and then type those requirements back into DAWs, but in their little world. So there was lots and lots and lots of these sort of silos that were occurring. That really was causing us some problems. And what we looked at, this is probably true from a lot of people. When you look at across engineering, it's not just us. This is probably, general statements that we just keep data to ourselves. Information was power, and we just keep it locked away, and you can't actually get to it easily. We have a unique challenge: security, national security, sovereignty, those sorts of things. But it's hard to get to and exploit. We had a lot of little tools around. So I've talked, I'll put that picture up. It had Windchill, it had IBM on there. The last count, we had 300 tools in NVDA in engineering. Some are used by one person, some are used by 1,000 people. But there's about 300, so there's lots of fragmentation around our business. And all of those, 300 tools, how many vendors have we got in the world? They come and go. So for some of those specialisms, for some of those little tools, if you like, they're not little to the people who use them, they could become obsolete quickly. And so we have to manage that. Our biggest challenge has been culture. I said that I started in 1986. I have a book, it's a paper book, How to Develop a Product. I can tell you now, if you opened it today, you would go, oh, that's how we do work today in NVDA. Pretty much the same. So it's, it's what I call the industrial era. We haven't had that revolution to how do we move from the sort of traditional transactional, sequential, we'll give you this, hand it over, into sort of more of a model-based holistic process. And the final thing is that a lot of our people, they haven't really got the skills capability to adapt to this new digital world because we haven't got the time to give it to them, potentially. So they work in the way they used to work. They like to work that way. It makes them feel comfortable. So that was our diagnosis. So what we then did, he says, pushing the button, there we go. Very busy slide, you can't see it, okay? Well, I can walk you through a little bit of it. Was, well, how do we fix these problems? So we started about 4 or 5 years ago to really look at the 3 key pillars that we wanted, which is one, we thought we're going to base everything around MBSE, SysML if you like, but we've got UML in the business. We want to make sure that those little siloey bits are disappearing. So the digital continuity is there across those domains. I'll show you an example at the end. And also a single source of truth. Everyone talks about single sources of truth. I think, really, we want a source of truth. There may be instances where you might have more than one source of truth, but everyone was working to that on a given project, about a given piece of information. And those were the foundations. And taking that, this is really about system engineering as a center. How does it interface with the other disciplines? So we set off on a whole bunch of activities as we got around here. So there's things like, system analysis, system engineering, specialty engineering, things like safety, things like environmental type work, software, electronics, mechanical, and looked at the interfaces between those disciplines. What was the information that was being passed? So it's not really about we use that tool, we use that tool. It's more about what information do we need to be able to do our job? And something on the other side is like, how do we move into manufacturing? So my role with the MBE bit really stops at I've got a design, okay? We have a production world and we have a support world. So how do we then transition into that to make sure that we don't give people stuff they can't use? It would be very silly for us to do so. But that was like this journey. This is where we started out. This is what we've been spending quite a lot of time working on over the last, 3 years, involving a lot of people. And it's given us some good outputs. So we talked about enterprise architecture earlier. That's good because we got one of those now. We never had one. This is a schematic. It's not a snapshot out of our model, but it's just to show you where we were getting to in terms of the connectivity and the types of things we use. So enterprise architecture was mentioned. We use it in Germany. So we have enterprise architects, not on this chart, but we do use Capella in France often. And from that, rather than trying at this stage to say, okay, one modeling tool, why don't we look at what is it that modeling tool brings to us and how do we connect that into the rest of our infrastructure? So as you can see on here, there's lots of, the little IBM tools. We use Doors Next. Do we use Doors Next that much? No, it's mostly Doors still today. So Doors is an interface into this, but the future, all our projects will start in Doors Next. We're also very looking at this side of the model, which is this is the system engineering world, if you like. This is the other disciplines world. So connecting things like our wind chill system into the ELM ecosystem, so we can have that linking between things. And we're working on that. What's it called, Stephen? SODI, did you say? Sodius Willett? Yeah, so we're working with them, looking at SODI. All right, okay, SOLI. I think we're going to get too familiar with them now. But that's what we're looking at, is how do we connect information? Because at the end of the day, we want a single source of truth. In the past, we would take things that came out of the IBM tools, export them into a container of some sort, the zip file, and we put it into the wind chill. And those two things are now disconnected. So they each have their own separate life. That's what we've been working with this. The sort of things around the outside, so how do we collaborate with customers? That's quite a tricky one, because quite a lot of the work we do, as you can imagine, is a secret level or above. So how do we do that collaboration? We have answers, but not in this room. And as we've got this sort of like a reference architecture as such, what we're also looking at doing is taking things that are new to us to come along. So things like model-based product line engineering. That's some of the focus for the future. So we have, if I asked you guys out there to draw a missile, what would you draw? And you'd be pretty much right. Everyone would have drawn that since the 1940s. It looks like a rocket. Okay, that's what people will draw. Well, guess what? We always start from scratch. We'll go, hey, we've got a requirement to do something. And it's turned out to look the same as it did before. So, leveraging something like the product line approach, we can have feature catalogs full of stuff we've done before. We can then use that for the future developments. We don't have to keep going back and being surprised when it turns out to look like a rocket. Okay. A lot of things around the simulation as well. So that's a capability we're building on. We deliver models. Things like 6 degree of freedom models to the customer, they use them. But we don't use them internally. So they're deliverable, but not used. So how do we build that into the workflow? So that was just to give you a big picture of the stuff we do. And I think I'm on my last slide. just to show you what we've actually, an example of what we've done. So this is something that we start out with some spec. We're doing something. We're going to make a cable. Okay, very simple thing everyone can relate to. It's going to connect two things together. So our system designers will come up with some schema. They might use Visio, they might use Rhapsody, they might use whatever. And then it'll get converted into some form which will either be a file or we'll email it to someone. All right. That then goes into something like E3 cable, which you can use to develop the electrical architecture. Or it could be into Visio, or it could be into something else, the thing we hardware, so building harnesses. And again, this is their siloed world, which we then put into an email or whatever, and it goes off into Creo to build that CAD model. Where we are today, and thanks to the work we've done, is that we can now pretty much bend down, bad for my back, that we have this sort of model, we model it in Rhapsody, we specify what that cable will look like, its characteristics in Rhapsody as part of the design process, which then gets across to E3 cable, pulls that information out of Rhapsody, and auto-populates for the electrical architect the view that they're required to do their work. So what do the signals mean? What sort of things, the crosstalk, that sort of stuff, which when they're happy, goes across to Creo and just imports it, and it builds that 3D picture of it. Now, typically, it never works the first time. So you take the 3D picture, you go, oh, that cable's a bit too bent. You know, it's 90 degrees. That's not a good thing in cable design. So we change it, and we flow that information back along. Okay. So I just wanted to highlight that. That's where we've got to today. Is this seamless? No. As you can see, we use Excel as an intermediate. We're exporting XML data or CSV. But this is our foundation. The next version of what we're doing, that will be hidden and be built into the technology. So as a system engineer, you just go, send that to E3, you know, to electrical. So that's the final, an example just to show where we're heading and where we have headed. But this is all just the foundation for us. You know, it's taken us a long time to get to this point, but this is starting to really break down the culture, because often this is maybe a UK job, this may be a French job, that might be back to the UK again. And so we're starting to break that culture of how we work together, how we can work internationally. On that note, I think it's Ian.
My turn.
It's Ian who's going to take you through what I'm not a worker, so the worker's going to tell you what they do.
Thanks, Mark. So hopefully you got a feel for where we've come from. It's been quite a long journey and we've still got further to go. So I just want to bring it together in terms of the V cycle, in terms of what we're doing in the systems and the software, dipping into electrical and mechanical up through the other side, the V for V and V. So I just want to give you a highlight, a showing of when we talk about our complex systems and our ELM environment. And I just want to take you through the journey that we're on in systems and software through that V cycle and how it fits with ELM and the tool set and the tools that we're using and how we're using them. So I'll start with a quick graphic on the complex systems that we develop at MBJ. So I touched on this earlier, but it's not just the things that go by. There's a lot more to the systems that we produce. So on the right is a graphic, corporate graphic of a lot of what we call platforms, different platform types that our products will go onto. And it's not just a thing that goes bang, because on the left-hand side, in terms of the overall architecture of the system, before you get to the equipment, as we call them, at the lowest level, you've got the subsystems. You've got things like command and control. You've got mission planning. You've got human factors and the specialist engineering that Mark mentioned that we call the transversals. You've got safety and security and environmental, integrated support, for example. That's all part of the development cycle, and those people working in those areas are part of our complex system. They're not a bit that bolts on at the end. They're not a different team who are stovepiped. We're starting to get them integrated into this model-based approach. It's model-based engineering. So that part of a system now, we've got elements of the system around mission planning, very complicated, very complex, the human-machine interface, command and control systems, we do those as well. Guidance and control with algorithms down at the software level. So this is all being linked up through using ELM and the tool sets. Early days, but we are getting there on some key programs. So I'll just take you back to Mark's V diagram. So as Mark indicated, there's a number of stovepipes. So at the front end, you've got the stakeholder needs. Certain parts of the business engage with the customer, but we as engineers can't, for example. As architects, we're breaking that barrier down. Your architects need to know your customer needs to know your architects, etc. It's all very stovepipey in terms of engagement with stakeholders, customers, the requirements in all these doors classics, architecture and design using the Rhapsody tool set and a few other tools as well, down to the functional implementation, which at MBJ for quite a few years, we've still been using the same tools and generating source code from those model-based tools. So we've been doing the model-based code generation. And there are examples from start to end where we've used the same Rhapsody model from systems and software. There's a little phrase I use on my project, and I push it a lot, is we are a team, so we need to collaborate and you need to co-specify. So co-specification and collaboration is key to making this work. Don't be afraid to talk to your colleague in the same team. That's why you're in the team. Yeah. Even if you're in different departments, you're in the same team for this development program. So Mark put this up with sort of the red status in between. I would say working in the ELM space, so our ELM environment in relation to where we are today, from the systems and the software going into the equipments, I would say, and this is not across every project, as Mark said, particularly in the requirement space, there's a lot of Doors Classic usage. But now, as Mark said, every new project, Doors Next. Every bit of concept or IRAD, Doors Next. It's that single source of truth, starting to leverage what we've already done. So I'll mention it now in case I forget, but in the architecture world, we have quite a few reference architectures now configured in ELM, which projects can utilize. So again, you're not starting from scratch. We invest, we produce a system architecture reference model for a type of system, and the project will use that as a starting point. So you've got ready-made models, your ontology, your language, it's consistent, and it's all in the same environment. And some of those reference models are international as well, because quite a few of our projects are international projects. So in terms of red, amber, green, RAG status, down the left-hand side, we are maturing, and this is the sort of space I currently work in. Down at the lower end, in terms of implementation, the challenge we have is that at the implementation stage, it goes into mechanical, it goes into electrical, it goes into cable, and that's the work that Mark and the team are doing to sort of integrate all that together. So with the ELM toolset, we're very much able to be very collaborative, co-specifying, working really closely at this front end. And towards the end of the V, in terms of testing, we call it proving, because you don't always test something. You can review it. You can do a read across. So we don't test absolutely everything. It's what we call proving. It's like a big umbrella term. So that's the color scheme. And what allows us to be there, and I'll probably stay on this diagram if I can, because the rest of the bit is a bit wordy and you've got those for reference. But in terms of the tool sets in ELM, so at the front end, in terms of stakeholder needs and requirements, we're using ERM Doors Next. So I'll refer to it as Doors Next. This is this blue. And you can see that starting to proliferate right down the left-hand side. So it's not just fixed in the requirement space. We're using that within the architecture and design. Because within the architecture and design world, we're using Rhapsody. So, and even in the old days, it was very stovepiped. And initially on some of our large programs, it was still stovepiped. So the requirements team would use Doors Next, either from scratch or migrate from Doors Classic. We'd have a requirements team. But then as the requirements have been maturing, working with the customer using Doors Next, the architecture and the design team have been able to access those requirements on their same screen and take a look at them and start to architect and design using Rhapsody to a point where you can sort of start to qualify some of those requirements. Obviously, with model-based approach, you can do a bit of simulation, animation. There are numerous examples at MBJ I've captured since I've been there where good architects have seen a requirement from a customer and modeled it, and it's not achievable. And they've done that really early, but they have the evidence from the modeling they've done that it's not achievable. The constraints are not right, but you can then work with your stakeholders to shape what the requirement needs to be. So we're not telling them they're wrong and we're right. We're just showing them and working with them using the model-based approach, showing the requirement they've given us, showing them the model. It's all in the same environment. And in the architecture and design work that we are doing with Doors Next, we're bringing those requirements into the models now. These are configured requirements in Doors Next, a bit like Steve demonstrated earlier with Rhapsody SE in terms of taking the requirement and bringing it into your model and showing it on a diagram. How powerful is that? Have a nice diagram, a bit of use case scenarios and goals and needs mapped to actual requirements that your customer's looking for. And also, I mentioned it because it came up at lunchtime also, down the left-hand side now with requirements and the architecture and design in Doors Next, in Rhapsody, we're using the work item feature extensively. So any updates or changes required of requirements or architectural design, a work item is raised and qualified and approved and scheduled as well. It helps our engineers not just go and do it, really. It becomes part of the planning of what we're doing for our system, our software work and our requirements work. It's scheduled for when it needs to be done. And again, Steve demonstrated this. You can pull those work items into the model. I do it all the time. I get a bit of kickback, but I like in my model to see the work items explaining the work I need to do in the model. So we're doing that down the left-hand side. That's maturing our requirements and our architecture and design work. On the right-hand side of the V, it's not connected yet, and we're working on it. So a lot of the guys who work in the proving, the testing, the qualification, the V&V side of the business, who've previously done it in spreadsheets and various other things, they're using ETM. They're slightly behind us at the moment. Up until about 12 months ago, they're quite way behind us, but now they're becoming more comfortable with ETM. We're now able to link that to the requirements. So again, from their perspective, they've gone into ELM from the proving perspective. And they're using ETM, and they can actually use Doors as well. Whereas I use Rhapsody, and I go in through Rhapsody, but I can see the requirements, and in time I'll start to see some of the proving as well, because we probably will use our modeling to support the proving guys with sequence diagrams and state machines, just to prove scenarios in requirements before they actually get to write the test cases, or support them in their test cases, or create their test cases from Rhapsody, the sequence diagrams with test points. So yeah, so the bit on the right with the ETM and the Doors Next, which has been using, that will close. I mentioned down the bottom left where it's sort of amber into red. I think the software aspects of that and the algorithms will get greener. We're still working the link between the Rhapsody and the MATLAB Simulink, such that your Rhapsody model could be a specification for your algorithms, for example, excuse me. It's all traceable, and that's the important word, traceability. So from a requirement through some architecture and some design down to the algorithms and the software, it's in ELM, so it's traceable. And probably might get time, but some of the challenges we're now facing is that a lot of our engineers, not just engineers, but managers and leaders, aren't used to being able to see everything. Yeah, there's nowhere to hide, and particularly with EWM, which underpins a lot of this engineering workflow management, with the work item, with the configuration, with the change control, with the dashboards. They're fantastic. The little widgets. They're really neat because somebody can come along, create a new capability in EWM. A recent one is assumptions. If you've got a big team, lots of people doing stuff, there are no requirements, or the requirements aren't signed off, or the requirements aren't mature enough, they tend to make a local assumption. I call it. Might be indoors, it might be in Rhapsody. Yeah. Over a period of time, that explodes, and it's a risk. So by formalizing those local sets of assumptions all over the place, of technical assumptions, into something like EWM or Doors Next, it becomes centralized. It becomes that single source of authoritative, single source of truth that people work to. I don't have a problem with the engineers not being prevented to formally create something. They just capture it as they're doing it. But very quickly, you've got to get your processes matured such that they do formalize it. They do qualify it as early as possible. But then it's a good example where somebody might make an assumption which becomes a formal assumption, which means the requirement needs nailing or the requirement is wrong. So now you've got to think about, actually, somebody's been working on that requirement for quite a while now, and it's not just one person. Quite a few people have been basing their architecture, their design, their implementation, their prepping, their proving based on that requirement. So if that requirement's going to change now, yeah, so powerful that you can identify the requirement that possibly will need to change, and everybody who's linked to it in ELM is aware of that. It's that impact assessment. Whereas in the older days of paper-based stuff, you relied very much on the people in the know to know what was happening. You still need that. That's a fundamental to this, I would say. I think Stephen mentioned it. You do need people who understand this and can live and breathe it. There's only so much of this. There's so much to ELM. There's only so much that you can just put in front of an engineer and off they go. They still have to be aware of the environment they're working in. They have to understand what part they play in the engineering. So that's, as we've matured, those are the tools we're using. I put this bit on the top left. I talked about reference architectures earlier. We do a lot of reference architecture modeling and creation outside any formal development, per se. We quickly need to get stuff together. We capture it from all over the business. We can dip into the different projects, what they're doing, and we can use Doors Next and we can use Rhapsody to start to create very rapidly using the same ELM environment on the same servers. We can reuse what we've already got on projects to mature them to something quite generic or a reference for future projects to use. And that's all in the same ELM environment. We have one of these in the UK, France, and Italy, don't we? Yeah. So very quickly, good. I've touched on a few of these things, but in the requirement space, so using Doors Next, EWM is great, particularly the task management, the monitoring and the reporting. You can have a dashboard. You don't have to generate a report now. You can bring up the dashboard and it's live. So we do that for requirements. Because it's Doors Next, it's an authoritative single source of truth. We're reusing requirements across within projects. To create variants, for example, is a good one. Getting reuse of requirements across variant products with variant specifications. And in terms of what we do day to day in Doors Next, it's getting better, collaboration. There's a lot of collaboration, and we're managing all our systems requirements in the one place, that authoritative single source of truth. Stephen mentioned it. I think we've mentioned before baselining, very fundamental. We're still getting to grips with that, I would say. But we are managing change through Doors Next. And it's all centralized. Everybody sees it. Everybody's part of it. In terms of the architecture and design space, we're using Rhapsody. We use Model Manager. We use an Eclipse. I'm not going technically, but we use Eclipse client to do it. It's an additional skill set, which quite a few people we do struggle with. But we use EWM for the config and change management. Again, task management, dashboards, reporting, it's all visible. With EWM, with Rhapsody, when you check a Rhapsody model in, at that point, you don't need Rhapsody to look at it, which I love, because I can look at multiple models on a web browser that are configured. I don't need to open Rhapsody. I can go and browse Rhapsody in EWM. That's a very powerful feature that we're getting better at exposing. So I can quickly check models, and I can jump from model to model as well. So I won't go into this, but we use project areas per project. We have team areas that sort of map the team structure, so everybody knows where they're working, and streams, and the component is sort of the basic configuration of the model. Different discussion for different day is how we use and share reference models across team areas and streams. Same thing, day to day, I mean, on the project I'm on, we've got hundreds of people using this, tens of people actively doing architecture and requirements on a daily basis doing this. And I'll leave this up, conscious of time, and we can please ask questions, but I've just noted in my mind, there's lots of benefits we have. We still have some challenges. Global config at the moment is a bit of a potato for us currently on the project. And Mark mentioned also an area we're working on right now is how you segregate secret and controlled data, for example, for a project that needs both to get a complete set of requirements and architecture. So these some of the current challenges, but we're learning. What I would say, there's quite a few of us having some fun, yeah? I'm doing stuff now I dreamt of 20 years ago, personally. That's what enthuses me, to go into work every day and help my project, my colleagues, get to grips with this.
It's why we give you a pay cut, wasn't it?
I'm just an engineer. So I'll leave that up. But
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. I mean, I think that's a great slide at the end, because I think generally those key challenges are pretty common across all of our industries. So yeah, the benefits are there to see for using the ELM products across the life cycle, and obviously the challenges are how do we manifest that across our industry. But any questions for Ian and Mark?
Hi there. I mean, we've single source of truth and golden thread and everything that's been brought up a few times today.
yeah,
And what you presented is an environment that's very much engineering focused and how engineers like to work. Have you tried or had any success in linking it outside of the engineering world to things like Oracle P6? Have you tried linking to like ServiceNow or
yes,
Salesforce and all that kind? And how's that gone for you, if at all? Because it is a challenge.
I've got the P6 answer.
Well, you go with P6 then.
No, you, all right.
Yeah, go on.
So in terms, no, we use P6. It's a bit of a challenge because obviously with EWM, you've got task management and workflow. So what we've said on the project I'm on, in terms of the major program project deliverables and milestones, it's all in P6, yeah, because that's what the very, very, very senior see and the customer sees to some extent. But it gets to a point where it's too low level detail for them, but we need that next level of detail. So we're sort of linking. It's a bit swivel chair, if you know what I mean, but it's not interconnected. It's like the swivel chair. Look at that screen, look at that screen. But something in P6 maps to a work item or something in EWM. But it relies on a few people on the project to make that work currently. It does work because we can hide all the detail of what we're doing from the P6 world, but we can carry on. And actually, it's really fundamental. I say a lot to the engineers and the team leads. Tell us what we're supposed to be doing. What are we working? What's the goal? What's our deliverable? Because it's only, they say, oh, don't worry about that, it's in P6. Well, I want to work. I need to know because I need to schedule my own work and the impact. So we are working, it's a bit swivel chair at the moment, but gradually, yes.
But I would just to build on that a little, that one of so the program we look at, you're right, it's engineering, the engineering world. But when we get outside of that, I mean, even in the engineering world, I would change, if we got a product in the field that develops a fault or something, that goes into SAP. So the interface for the customer. So how do we flow that from SAP through into maybe into Windchill, from Windchill into wherever? And we're working on those sort of connection issues, but it's a case by case basis. We're not trying to, the phrase we used to use is boil the ocean. Whereas we could say, okay, let's make an integration to SAP. Let's make an integration into Aprilla for manufacturing system. Let's make an integration into whatever else. Where we see there's a benefit to doing something, so going on a single source of truth, if we only have one change request to worry about, it flows all the way through the system, we can always look at the state of that. Today, there may be 3 different things, sources you need to look at, and they're not necessarily digitally linked either. So we are trying to tackle it, but we're getting better value from trying to connect up all the engineers at this stage. We're engineers. I'm an engineer as well, apparently. I was an engineer, I should say. Sorry, years ago. Go, shout.
A lot
Yeah, quite
a lot of
close.
your products, you say, fit on other platforms. Have you, or has MBDA given any consideration of how you would share models in the interest of system of systems with your customers, but still protecting IP and that sort of thing?
Yep. So we started maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We were looking at how we could federate model execution. So typically, we could produce, and I'll just go for something simple. We have an effector, and so we'll have a model of the effector, and that has to fit onto the model of a platform of some sort. And we thought, well, an easy way to demonstrate how we could do this would be a power system. So what if we turn on our product, it drains power. The platform has to provide it. And so we've looked at, in partnership with Kinetic and Rolls-Royce and a few others, how we can then federate that model execution. And what it was coming down to, we got to, where it is today, it's sort of a little bit parked because there's a real project coming along where we'll have to do this. So this was sort of the precursor to it. But it was a case of there were basically segregated areas, but there was an orchestrator that would say, okay, this is the scenario, that model needs to do something. It would record the result, but the other people in that chain couldn't see the model. You were hidden. So we didn't give away our intellectual property. You couldn't reverse engineer it, although I imagine no one really tried, but that was the theory behind it. So it was really around this orchestration technology. We could then give the visual result or set of results, and each individual company or supplier or whatever would then provide their model to meet the interface spec or whatever, but you didn't care what was in it. It could be an Excel spreadsheet for all it mattered. And it was very successful for what we tried. Now it's a scaling thing. How do you scale that up? So typically we wouldn't use things like Excel. We might use Python script. We might use MATLAB. We might use Simulink. But that doesn't mean to say all our suppliers are using that. So that's where this sort of orchestration type layer was quite important, that we knew the API we could talk to, they knew what they could send to us, and then the security was laid into that to actually prevent others from doing that, from accessing where they shouldn't get to access it. Any more? Coffee? See, everyone wants a coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee and biscuits.
Well done.
Yeah, so we'll have a quick
You want me to turn it off?
a quick 15-minute sort of break, cup of coffee, perhaps get a photograph outside behind the big wheel, or in front of the big wheel, preferably, and then we'll have the panel session at the end. So thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can everybody hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's a microphone.
Maria, can you hear me? Yeah. Cool. Hello. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah. That's as far as I go.
Not quite binary.
Not quite binary, no. No. Right. Have we got everybody back in? Or...
Yeah.
Right.
If we haven't, they're missing out.
Well, this is it now, isn't it? Yeah.
Feel like I'm in Westland. We're going to get up in a minute.
Is it? Yeah, we're good to go. Yeah, excellent. Right. Well, look, thank you very much, everybody. This is the long-awaited panel session that we had planned previously, which we postponed for today. So we've got it in today. So that's great that we've managed to get through the day unscathed so far. You probably know all these guys already because they've been talking to you throughout the day. So we're not going to do introductions. What we want to do as part of this session is really give you guys, the audience and our community, an opportunity to share, collaborate, and discuss, you know, what's coming up for what we've been through today. In fact, about what you've heard about the tools, where they're going. Give you an opportunity to shout out, and not shout out literally, obviously, keep it nice, but we're going to ask some questions of these guys, and I'm going to ask some questions, share some questions with you as well, so you've got an opportunity to voice your sort of interest with the tools, I guess. Okay. The other thing we want to talk about as well as part of this session is the sort of the future forward as well, in terms of how you can sort of collaborate and sort of help us with the screen's going crazy in the background, with the next one, basically. So what we did as part of the invitation process for today was we had a little box on there which was capturing your areas of interest, and we've got some good input through that. And what we really wanted to do as part of this session was not script it as such. We've got a few questions which we've sort of put together internally as a team, sort of which we thought covered the basis of what was included in those interest sections, basically. Like I say, I'm gonna fire some of these questions up to our panel here, but feel free if you've got a question that you want to answer or you've got some input to provide, you can do that as well. Okay, so without further ado, I shall start off with our questions. Basically, I'm also sort of mindful of the fact that we've got a 4 o'clock finish, and I've been told we've got a sort of an after session as well. So we'll try and get through this as painfully and as quickly as possible. So what we did was, from those interest sort of points that we got in, we sort of tried to break it down into sort of our 3 pillars, if you like. So people, process, and the products. So we've had quite a lot about the products today. We're going to start with the people, because without the people, you guys, the users and the community, that you guys are driving the tools. You guys are using the tools and getting the benefits from the tools. Okay, so we'll start off with the people. I'm going to aim this potentially at Ian and Mark as a double team. This first question.
Good cop, bad cop.
Well, not to start off with the last guy, but I just felt that we, as you were going through your presentation, and I've got to say that all the presentations were fantastic today, right the way from the product ones as well, right the way through to the user stories as well. So the question, I mean, one of the sort of questions we bounced around internally was, as systems engineering, we consider you guys as leaders within your business in terms of the systems engineering process. So, what are the challenges that you guys have found with sort of, with regards to tool adoption and changing the mindsets? I think you did you mentioned about having lots of disparate tools, and rather than going for a one tool solution, basically, you sort of mentioned about the sort of swivel chair process I picked up on there, where you're picking the best of all of the tools that are available, basically. So, I mean, talk to us a little bit about that and about how you feel that, those conversations.
Just, I know Mark mentioned that not going for that single tool, but I remember on my journey in MBJ with ELM, it was back in 2014, 6 months after I started. And at that point in time, the directive was to have one tool. Yeah, we had all these other tools. Artisan, EA, there's a few others, and we chose Rhapsody. But as Mark mentioned, with your people, particularly in an international company, there's different cultures, different approach, different investment, different buy-in. It's not a French tool, is a good phrase. So over the period of time, we did set that aim to rationalize to the one tool. But being pragmatic and being honest and being realistic, it's sort of eased out a bit. So it does create a challenge for us. But in business, you can't be too constrained of your people. You need your people. If you upset the people, you don't support your people, they will leave. So sometimes you have to bite your tongue. Because the people process, it's the people. Yeah, I've learned that as I get older, I suppose. And in MBJ, we're recruiting a lot of graduates, undergraduates, apprentices. Yeah, they're our future. But the world is different now. They can go wherever they want. So you've got to look after your people. So you've got to, from the older, I shouldn't say older, for the people who've been around the longest in our organisation, you still need them. You've got these new people coming, they're so enthusiastic. So in terms of tools, they bring ideas as well, that we're not even aware of. So you look after your people. I think having a single tool, I now think it's impossible, personally. But you have to manage it, and you can manage it. But be prepared to face a challenge, but it's going to be hard. It's also going to be very rewarding when people are using the tools effectively, and they love it as much as some of us do.
I think from my perspective as well is that Ian showed you the heritage of where MBDA came from. We're lots of different businesses, and those different businesses have had different ways of developing products. And we've spent a lot of time trying to bring those different ways of working together. And I think through something like our model-based engineering approach is that we're getting there with methodology. We're getting there that with standardizing on, say, a SysML approach, we're standardizing on UML. We're looking at what the data means, the information that we require. And we're not, we would love to only have one tool. I mentioned we have 300, and the licensing costs for all of those things is ridiculous, honestly. So we would like to be able to standardize that down. Well, I think where we're heading is we'd rather, there's the information pool. Those tools and technologies become authoring tools, just like a Visio is a drawing tool, perhaps. So you can imagine that you could use Rhapsody in a similar way. It's a drawing tool. The information it works on is in another repository, but you could equally use a different tool. We don't want to, as Ian said, we don't want to stifle someone's creativity in a way. That where there is a better approach, let's have a look at it. But it's got to be within the context of the whole of business. So there will be times where we'll say no, and we have starting to put a lot more strict governance around that. We do have familiar phrase, shadow IT everywhere. People, especially in the software area, they don't like to do what everyone else likes to do. So we have some challenges there, but we recognise those and we're working with them so that we do have that, an information-centric approach rather than a tool technology-based approach.
How much do you think that, where the tools are concerned, you need to have the background processes in place around governing the use of those tools and having a process in place about bringing new tools in or getting the use of the tool? I mean, is that something, Stephen, I know you're maybe not as far down the line with your sort of rollout with the tools as such, but as another systems engineering leader within an organisation, where's the crossover point between getting the best out of the tools, maybe not crossover point, but maybe the point where the tools take a backstop and you have to have the processes in place? Is that something that you feel is important as well? Or?
I think the process has to be first. Right. I mean, the tools are an enabler to the process, aren't they? So, the most important thing is that we have robust processes and that everyone is working to a common set of process. And ideally, in the same tool environment and then everything else. But the process, I think, is first. I think that's the process has got to come first. The tools are there to support the process and enable the process. And if they can make life a bit easier for some people, then that's what they're there to do. But if they're making people's lives harder, then there is something wrong, isn't it? And if that's just a user experience, if you go into the tool doors or whatever tool and it is not making your life easier, it is not functioning properly at all. There's something wrong with it, isn't there?
If I may add, so I completely agree. Process is definitely the key. But process is also journey. So it's not like I have a process this, and this is going to be something we're going to enforce, and it will not change. Process is evolving as you get more companies on board. They're going to basically bring you their experiences, and perhaps you need to adjust your processes. Tool is there to support. If there are no functionality, then you need to work with the vendor to get the functionality. You always need to kind of, when you think about it from a process perspective, is what you're trying to achieve. I think in all our engineering experiences, traceability is probably the most important part. You need to trace from the start to the end. If something happens with your end users, customers, you need to basically prove that it was not engineering fault, or basically try to figure out what is the root cause of the problem. So that's the one piece that you should always kind of make sure part of a process is traceability is built in. And it doesn't matter which tools you use on the end, if it actually serves your purpose. What I've seen with a lot of customers, what works well is when you really kind of enforce, educate on a process, you get support and buying from others. So it doesn't matter which tool they use on the end.
We often talk about, I mean, the journey. We talk the quote unquote journey, and that often starts with having an understanding from a system engineering perspective of what you should be doing, which then drives maybe a tooling decision and then adoption of the tool to meet those system engineering standards. And that journey doesn't mean chucking all the tools out there and having everybody hit everything at the same time. It's all about an evolutionary process, starting with the simple stuff, the things that have got the highest sort of return of investment, if you like. Get your requirements right, because if you don't get them right, everything else is toast anyway. And then rolling out all these other features like global config and workflow management and test management. And it's a evolutionary process. If you try and do everything all at once, you're almost guaranteed to fail. So I think you guys have been doing that for a long, long time, haven't you?
Yeah, you reminded me, I mentioned it earlier. So with this particular tool set, I can work in as an architect, be in the environment using my tool set. And my colleague who's in the requirements team, either sat next to me or in the next room, he's doing the requirements for the same system. I can see what he's doing and I can use what he's doing, vice versa. So it's that linkage, that traceability. We're not physically co-located, but we're working in the same team, in the same environment. I'm using it from my perspective, what I need to do, and Mark's using it from his perspective. Yeah. That's where it starts to help.
I mean, it's been mentioned a couple of times. I know there's a couple of questions about the single source of truth. The single source of truth isn't the tool you're using, is it? It's the data we're talking about, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, we do have, I mean, if we talk about mass properties of our product, we don't have a single source of truth, which is a bit worrying because we need to worry about things like center of gravity and what have you. But yeah, everyone has it in their own spreadsheet. And this is one of the things that we need to eliminate, is to make sure that everyone works with the same set of data for the same, in the same units always helps as well.
Cool. So, I mean, one of the other questions we had sort of down under the people session was about, if you guys could give a tip to those people out there that are starting off with the tools, or maybe thinking about maybe getting involved with the tools and buying the tools. We've got a couple of sort of people here prospectively looking at the tools, to invest it. What would be your tips around getting up to speed with the tools and starting the rollout process, if you like? Any takers, or shall I pick somebody?
Well, from a fairly selfish point of view, he says get some help in.
Well, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? For organisations who are just starting that systems engineering journey, maybe, and going through the tool selection point, it's about understanding your own processes, isn't it? I guess. Would you, start for the process, training people up, getting to speed with, I guess, understanding, developing your own processes. What do you think, guys? I mean, is that something where you need to sort of, I suppose we spoke about a little bit there, didn't we, when we said about, does the tool, the process comes first. you know, how much that process is set in stone and how much can be tweaked, adjusted to meet meet the tools needs or whatever. You know, what your thoughts
You need
on
to
that?
understand what your business wants to achieve.
Yeah.
With that. So whether it's a process or whatever you're bringing it in for a reason. Usually businesses work to make money.
Yeah.
Okay, but you might have customer satisfaction. We need to improve something, and understanding that. Let's use system engineering speak. Understanding your use cases for why it is you want to look at that journey. Whether, you know, why do we choose model-based system engineering? We could have chosen something else. We could have chosen a different one. It just happened to fit our use case of what we were trying to achieve. Then we can look at what does it mean to deploy that to a business. So our business is, well, let's say 18,000 today. Of that, it's probably about 14,000 engineers we've got to tackle in that. So quite heavy engineering usage. That's a different challenge to if you're in a business where you only have 200 engineers and what you're trying to tackle. So be realistic about it, you know, as well. That's another thing. A tool won't solve all your problems. It's not a silver bullet. There is no such thing as that. You've got to put the work in, the effort in. And the key, just involve people as well. Involve the users. Who are the people who are going to end up doing this? So we could have gone out and gone, we bought the IBM tools chain, we bought PTC, right, there it is. Just get on with it, use it. And people will develop bad habits, bad practice, they'll rebel against it. If you take them on that journey, how is it we are going to help you to do your job better? That's a key thing for us. We spend a lot of time in that education piece.
Yeah.
And in the, you know, we're trying to win the hearts and minds of folk, really. Do we do it well? It's difficult. It's a really hard challenge. I mean, I put on my slide about cultural issues. It's not just between nations, and it can be between departments on the same site who work together for 20 years. They still have these sort of tensions between where they've come from, their journey. You know, oh, I prefer that tool to that tool. But really, you know, the technology, the tools are secondary to what is it we're trying to achieve? You know, what does good look like for us? Those tools, I used an argument about screwdrivers. You know, but if you're an engineer, I give someone a screwdriver. They don't really care about whether it's which make it is. You know, is it a Phillips one? Is it a crosshead? Whatever. Yeah. It can do the job of screwing. All right. What we have this challenge then is, well, that allows you to do SysML diagrams. That allows you to do this. It doesn't really matter about the tools so much, but people get so, you know, hung up on that. That's what I was brought up on. As an engineer, it's all about doing the engineering of the product, and it shouldn't be about the technology. You should be able to abstract that away from people.
Okay. Well, we sort of the next question I've got on our sort of people section is, Paris. I mean, there's been so much development going on from IBM in terms of you know, user interface, you know, the usability of the tools as well, the improvements. You know, as a business man, we see the updates and the improvements over the last 18 months, 2 years. It seems to have suddenly helicoptered out. I mean, you know, what are the challenges that you find around sort of, I guess, listening to the customers and trying to pick sort of the right way to go with introducing changes and introducing improvements to the user interface and the usability of the tools? You know, is it what drives those you know, the prioritization around that?
Yeah, good question, Mark. So we hear a lot, we need to improve IBM engineering usability. And the question is where to invest. What's the most important part? IBM has the kind of UX methodology called IBM Carbon. This is what they promote, not just across IBM engineering, but across all the IBM portfolio. So you will see basically kind of very similar themes coming from various products. What we decided early on is as we're investing in a system LV2 is use IBM Carbon to build the Rhapsody SC. That's what you see in the UI. It uses basically newer technology, React-based technology. It's responsive, gives you all the bells and features that most of us would like to see in modern tool. Then we looked at in ELM, what is the biggest pain point that we have, and Jazz Reporting Service Report Builder has really the different UI compared to the rest of the ELM. So we said, let's use this as an experiment from ELM perspective and see how we can actually improve. And this proves to be a journey. It's different when you actually build a completely brand new tool versus when you actually need to kind of change the UI for the tool that was built from scratch by developers. We had designers involved, we got the designs in place, we got the feedback from customers. We have our first release with 7.03, our report builder got the capabilities around managing reports. We got some additional feedback from customers, improved it, add some additional capabilities. We released 7.1. Now we're working on the viewing reports, and next year, hopefully, we're going to finish with the creation of reports. And once that is finished, we're going to try to move the team in a different kind of part of the portfolio. What I would like to see is that we invest in the area where everyone touches this. You heard the probably term information radiators, our dashboards, information radiators. That's something that touches every single product. And if we can actually improve that, that would be a big. So I think this is the area where I would like us, IBM Engineering, basically to invest in the future and bring this kind of very similar theme in a portfolio that you see with the Rhapsody SC and the report builder.
It's a big enabler, isn't it, for teams that are collaborating, is, we're putting all that information into the tools, or pulling information from different tools, from the wide angles of your toolscape, if you like. So having that ability to display that information and to be able to analyze and create, we use the phrase slice and dice that information into a way that people can sort of visually grasp that visually. That's the sort of the nub of collaborating, isn't it? I guess that's what the engineering tool is about.
Yeah. So the challenge that we had with Report Builder is not that it needed basically new face, but it needed a lot of capabilities that we've heard for years from customers, and we really spent time to provide those. So if you look at the managing reports, there are features that probably everyone in this room have asked once yourself, or even put the idea in place. Now, when you're basically looking at managing reports, you know when report was created, who created it, when was modified, who modified it, when was run, who ran that report. You have data, how many times this report was executed. There's a counter of this information. You have average sum of all the kind of execution, how long it took, so average time to execute. Kind of, it does not give you. There was intention to provide the capabilities to say, hey, I like this report. Really did not like that feature. I said, this is subjective. I want something that I can measure, and that's why we said, okay, if this report has been executed 500 times and this is 5 times, of course, this has more value, and users have proven, and stuff like that is much better. But yes, it's not just building a new interface; it's also providing the capabilities that are missing. And on top of that, of course, you need to support existing customers. Perhaps like we got the new TRS feed coming from RMM 703. So there are things like that that's going to be coming as well.
Okay. Just on that point, this was a question that I put in at the end of the product one, but I should mention it. A lot of our customers on ELM SaaS. So migration point for those customers that are currently using or heavily used report builder, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things they should be aware of in terms of, at some point, the IBM will be contacting them to say, we're going to upgrade your system from 703 to 7.1. What are the things they need to be looking at in terms of, about the reports they've got on their dashboards? And, I know you mentioned earlier on that 90%, I think a very high percentage of the reports that are being built, provided there's no additional sort of, customization, I guess, in there, should just swap over to the new reporting structure, basically. So, I mean, what kind of things do they need to be looking at for in terms within their reports? Do you want to give us a bit about that?
Yeah, good question. So, a couple of things. for managing reports, the key is the structure. Prior to 703, you manage reports out of tags, which is common usage because tags were introduced first, or folders. So you could also have a hybrid. With 703, you can only manage reports using folders. So you need to kind of look at all your reports that you have and kind of put them in the right structure. This is not something an administrator should do. Administrators should guide what would be the right process. I wrote an article on jazz.net. It's about how to organize your reporting assets. And we basically preach about at the root level, have a minimal number of folders, no reports at all. Just about, I don't know, 8, 9 folders, and that's it. You're going to get some system generated folders that IBM Engineering provides. And then you want to kind of create a folder for users. And within a users folder, each user should create its own folder and put their reports in that area. Then you can create like a business unit or projects folder, and each business unit or project basically would create its own subfolder and manage their reports under that. And often happens you basically find report person have left, you have no idea it's used anymore, you don't want to delete it, create a folder, recycle, and just put it in recycle. And if you don't actually see that the report has been executed for 2-3 months or a period of time, you can just delete it safely in that case. So that's one area. The second area, when you're upgrading to like some from 703 to 7.1 SaaS, the question is, are you also changing our backend to LQE relational store? That's a different dimension, because in that case, they should provide you with an option to have Jenna as well relational store for a period of time. Because what's going to happen is your reports would fall into 3 categories. Reports that you developed using UI, so nothing kind of manually done. Those are 90 to 95%. Those are the reports that most organizations have. Doesn't matter if it's using LQ Jenna or relational store. Those will be magically converted to whatever technology you want. The ones that you want to worry about is custom expression reports. So those are the reports that you added a small snippets of Sparkle to enhance the report, and the advanced query reports where you actually went to the report definition and changed something in the Sparkle itself. At that point in time, you cannot modify anything in the UI. So those 2 categories you need to convert from Sparkle to SQL before you can remove the Jenna. And we basically provided sample snippets in a documentation how you can actually do it. We also gave you constructs with if and statement, so you can enclose your Sparkle statement and then enclose your SQL statement. So you can, in the same custom expression, you can have both Sparkle and SQL. This gives you ability, you don't have to create a new report, you just basically run it against the backend of your choice. Similar we've done also for the advanced query. Depending on a customer's, what I've seen is when you actually use a custom expression, you probably have 2-3 patterns that someone have come up with and just kind of push it through the organization. You need to find what are those patterns in SQL and try to kind of convert them. There's also in the manage reports option, there's a capability for you to identify which type of the reports is. So you can identify which reports are affected and basically work with those end users to convert those reports. Definitely, it's not something that admin should take responsibility on. You need to kind of push that to the end user, but you need to give them guidance how to do that and what's the process. So I think that's the key for especially moving from 7.3 to 7.1, because that's important, because 7.2, it comes out of the end of the year, Jenna is not supported anymore. So you need to actually complete this activity before you move to higher versions.
So I guess if I can throw one out to the audience who've been sat there very quietly waiting for your o'clock. Can I get a show of hands of, you users out there who are sort of heavily using Report Builder and creating your own reports? Yeah. Yes, we do, Matt. Yes. So, I mean, follow-on question from that is, you know, how many of you guys are doing customization of the Spark, you know, writing your own Sparkle queries in there, basically doing anything outside of the normal UI, or are you just using the UI to do it?
Just Hazel.
Go on, Hazel. Right. Okay. So I guess from that point of view, we should be okay. We should be okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking over at Joe there and thinking, I remember all those reports Dave wrote and just what's in there.
Well, so perhaps they're not familiar, but if you have a large organization, I'm pretty sure you have smart engineers that they figure out some tricks, and that's why you need to run kind of report and see other reports that should be converted.
Can I just add something?
Yes.
Document generation and reporting has been a bugbear of mine in all the tools, personally. When I worked in the tool space, nobody was interested in the vendor community producing templates for customers to just do it and tweak it with widgets. For some bizarre reason, I think the reason refers to what you were saying earlier. In the old days, it was developers who developed the case tools. They weren't really users in the old days. It's much, much better now. But even with the tool set we're using, I really struggle because I'm an architect paid to architect a system,
yeah.
Not to, I need documents. And because the tool set's growing and more people are using it, as a business, you need to have people with the right skills to support your end users using your tools. And for me, in the design and the architecting and requirements engineering, you can get the SysML and all the methodologies and the language. But within the tool set, you do need people really switched on. There are clever people, and they need to accept, to a degree, they're going to be doing more of the customization, template generation. They're not going to be writing software, and they're not going to be doing system architecting, because I still see today, I've got engineers now who don't want to generate a TRS, a document, because it's too bloody difficult. Yeah. So they choose. It's when I dig underneath, they said, "Oh, I don't want to generate a document. I want to keep it in the model. This is model-based engineering. I just want my requirements in the model.
Yeah.
I don't want to generate a document." When I get under the surface, they don't have time. Yeah, they've done all this great stuff in Doors Next. They've done the baseline. They've got a technical requirement specification for a product. It's baseline. It's there. Let's move on. And we're saying, well, 2 or 3 years' time, when you're not around, if the customer wants to look, how are they going to find it? That's their problem. No, it's not. No, it's not. So why don't you generate a document? Well, one, I don't have time, but really, I struggle to understand it, and I need to do some more requirements engineering. So it goes back to the people. You've got to have a team of people with the right mix of skills in this tool set. Reports and documents, I still think are really valuable after decades of doing this stuff. I like a document. I like to sit down with a TRS and just read things, mark it up. I'm a bit old school, but
I was going to say, where does Farage need to take?
There's a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Ian, I'm going to disagree with you, sorry. I struggle constantly, with the concept that too many engineers want to take the data out of the model because they want to work on it outside of the model. So they want to do like a document export, and then they'll take it, and then they'll just stop looking at doors or ELM. And I find more often than not, I don't want to make it. Obviously, there's got to be documents generated. You'll never get away from that.
You need a deliverable.
You need it. You absolutely do need it. But on the same vein, I kind of want to encourage as many engineers as possible to work and live in the tool compared to doing those document exports.
I agree.
Yeah, but I do agree with the principle, which is if you've got highly skilled system engineers, why would you want them configuring a tool, regardless if it's the reporting element of it or any other part of the tool, right? Yeah. It's not the best use of their skill set to be configuring a tool when they should be doing what they should be doing, which is engineering the system that they're looking at.
Yeah.
And you know, if the tool isn't, I go back to my point earlier on, if the tool isn't helping, if it's not making things quicker, faster, more efficient, there is a problem with the tool, I think, to some extent. But I do agree that, you know, having a mix of skill sets, people who can configure and administer the tool, and the system engineers who are using it to do the job that they're there to do.
They're all important. They're all part of the same team. They rely on each other. They're a team. They've all got different positions, different roles to fulfill. Together as a team, they will succeed. If you've got team players missing, you won't win.
Or if you're trying to play them out of position,
Yes.
to use a football analogy.
Or give them
But, yeah,
opportunities to develop. I mean, I've seen people come in to do more of the tool stuff, but they've become systems engineers.
Got a question?
Yeah, I come from the same environment, same next project as Simon. One of the reasons that I'm generating reports is because I can't get the UI to filter to what I want to filter on. So I'm trying to filter on the content links.
Right.
I'm trying to do some quite complicated things. And I know that the new filters that we're going to get will help that a bit, but it's still not going to solve the problem. So that's one of our primary use cases for reporting is actually to get us down to the data set that we need to look at.
Yeah. I guess there's also different reasons for reporting. There's reasons for reporting on progress through the Graham. Sorry.
Right. So one of the other reasons, one of the things I've spoken about a lot in the past is you've got to spend as much time engineering the systems that you've got supporting your systems engineering as you have doing your systems engineering. Okay. That means you've got to understand how the data is built, which is partly what Steve got with that simple ontology for your requirements, but that's really powerful. That's the starting point. That guides your reports. Okay, and that's also driven by your process. So it's your process, all of you talk about people process tools. We've only just started talking about data. That data is key. That's what you're reporting on. You're reporting progress and you're reporting the mountain of documents that you're going to send off to Iron Mountain somewhere. Okay, because they're still going to need that in some virtual format or physical one. But those three things are key. And you almost need a team that understands the systems engineering process that can support the tools. I mean, that's where people like Mark's team come in, basically. But you almost need it embedded within your organization. You're quite lucky you've got Simon Morris still, I hope. Maybe.
He's still there.
Yeah. But those people are key because they understand the process, they understand the data. They're building out, hopefully understanding how the tools are working together to be able to drive that. So your systems engineer can actually just press a button, get the report out, or they can generate a dashboard that you can see progress against. But it all depends upon having that consistent data model that ties in with your process and your artifacts in the models.
Yeah,
and I'm not just talking about SysML.
No.
It's across everything.
For those types of people I mentioned earlier, I alluded to, they are enablers. They're enablers, they're part of your success, not just the systems and software and algos and all that. They're part of the team.
So that's why I'm excited with the possibility that AI actually changed the space. Think of a world is you know what you want to get in the report. You don't know how. Perhaps you don't even care how. But you can speak in a natural language, in English, and say, I want to create a traceability report between my requirements, implementation, and the test. And Report Builder provides you the output, which means that it's also created a report for you. So this is so this is the area where we are actually starting to invest. There are other parts of IBM that are looking in various technologies in this area, but we are seriously looking from Report Builder, JRS perspective, how we can actually solve this problem. I mean, the interface with the natural language and AI assistant, that already exists. It just connects into Report Builder. Question is, what do you actually do with the information that's provided and how to drive it? So perhaps some kind of a teaching that for your organization, what does it mean, TPS? Kind of teach the model is what does it mean TPS, which data it needs to actually extract. Definitely the first step would be to JRS, but I could see this easily extended to document generation in the future as well.
you mentioned AI there. I realise we're probably at less than a minute left now, or even over time. Yeah. Okay. So the last question I wanted to throw out there is to you guys, and show of hands or just shout out. You know, how many of you within your organisations are actually looking to embrace AI or looking to avoid it?
One question.
Cheers. Okay, so yeah, who's looking to embrace it? Cool. And who's looking to avoid it? Some things. Yeah, I think it's got its use case, hasn't it, at the end of the day? Okay, well, I've got loads of questions, but we've run out of time. So I guess the last thing I did want to mention, which isn't really a question, is more about the user event and this event for us, basically. So we always wanted this to become a user-focused event and a sort of an opportunity for you guys within the community to speak to the people who are developing and, you know, driving the tools in the right direction for you guys. So as part of that, you know, we as an organisation want to get your feedback. We've got a QR code, which I'm very well stood in front of at the moment, but they are dotted around the screen. So it would be great if we could get a bit of feedback from you guys about, one, the event. Sarah's put some questions together on there, haven't you, about, you know, how we can shape the next event.
Yeah, just really short, sharp questions. Qualitative feedback.
And obviously, we want to thank you for your time attending today as well, and, you know, coming to support the event. It's good to see everybody here. I guess thanks for all the presentations, really good. Nikolai as well, coming all the way over, and fantastic speech there, and obviously for ours, and Steve's still here at the back, I can see there. So, Mark, did you want to do any closing speeches?
To finish that up, I mean, yeah, thank you all for coming for a start, because the event wouldn't be an event without you guys. Thank you to the IBMers that have supported us on this event again, and very special thanks to Sarah, because Sarah has organised pretty much everything and kept us all in our place. So yeah, it's been great, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you all at the next event, and I trust you'll come and join us in the bar for some drinks and nibbles and a bit of networking, and we can have a off the record chat if you like. So,
yeah,
so thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And don't forget water bottle, because I ain't carrying them home again.